for over 15 years, I've used Studio Technologies hardware in some way, shape, or form in my work. From fiber optic transports to announcer boxes to Dante-based comms. We've got Studio Technology stuff all tied through many of the productions that we do. Gordon Kapes is the president of Studio Technologies and has guided the company's development for over 4 decades. Gordon, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
How did you get into this? How did you get started?
Well, I guess like a lot of young guys and gals, I was an audio geek, and literally in junior high school was playing around with things and doing dumpster diving in the old telephone company days, and then got into stage crew and, both performed in high school productions, but also did audio. So it would be pretty funny that I'd be running around in costume, working on some mixer or something. And
there was always one of us. There was always one. I think many people here were that person. That was running around. The only person that knew how to plug this into that.
During high school, people would have master keys. That was the holy grail if you figured out how to get a master key. But they gave me a master key because they'd say, well, can you come in this weekend and work on the so-and-so? I'd be like, okay, I really wanted to stay home and, go to the pool hall. But, okay, I'll come in and use your key and do that. So, it's really odd, but I guess as kids, you kind of picture what you want to do. I don't know if some of you said, I want to work in movies, I want to work in TV. I said, I like making stuff. I like making products. And I have to say, the first few I made didn't work, but I like the idea.
I have things that I made last week that don't work.
We do too, but now I have the time and the luxury of working through it. But so I went to engineering school and was the chief engineer of the college radio station and went on from there. And Studio Technologies was started by my audio mentor, the late Jim Cunningham, quite an interesting guy. And Jim worked in studios and was tech director, and I learned from him. And then he had a product called the Echo Plate, which was a plate reverb, if anybody remembers that. But to do reverberation, it was a big piece of sheet metal suspended at the corners. And a lot of the recordings that we know of from the 60s or 70s or even 80s that we think, it must have been a really sophisticated reverberation method. It was actually a steel plate suspended at the corners. Anyway.
And it just vibrated.
Right. You drove it with a driver, and then you had pickups on it, and quite a magical thing. Only problem is 1 meter by 3 meters for the big one. And I remember seeing, I think Eventide came out with a digital reverb, and it was clear that the electromechanical was on the way out. So did that and, did telecom and did audio. And then about 2000, I realized my real love was broadcast and audio. And I kind of put aside the telecom products and have, concentrated on audio. And for me, professional audio is my comfort zone because I think working with people like all of you, if we make a mistake, hopefully you'll let us know and you'll give us a chance to fix it. And you enjoy the process of working together to achieve greatness. It seems like in the consumer business or other businesses, if you don't nail it the first time, people are unmerciful on how they view it. And right. I guess I have too thin of a skin, and I enjoy the camaraderie of working with people. And I go out in the field when I can. And so we've continued to add 2, 3, 4 products a year to our line, and it's going well. And we sell both in the U.S. and also now more and more internationally, which is kind of fun.
Well, how do you come, like, what I find fascinating about a lot of the products that you make that I own is that there are just all these little things that are in there, and I know that they're all there for a reason because I always know that I don't know what that button does, but I'm sure that somebody needed that button. They're very they're crafted for the production, for that mission exceptionally well, and I think it's interesting that right now I'm talking into a 205. There's a lot of little bits and pieces, and I know that if I don't use that feature right now, that eventually I'm going to find my way to that feature. how do you interact with production companies to figure out exactly what needs to be in the box, and then also how do you decide what not to put in the box?
Well, I think that I try to keep enough ego to say, okay, I'm going to go and make this successfully. But also when I talk to people, listen to what they say and then ask questions back. And I enjoy the tweaky things. And our goal is always, if you get a product, it's kind of silly to pick a number, but 98, 99% of the applications, I want our product to support it. So if you say, we're going to go do an awards show and we want to get set up, I want to make sure that you can hit almost every need. And if you can't, I listen to what you say. An example is 2, 3, 4 years ago, we heard from the Super Bowl. It was Friday morning, I think. The A1, the audio engineer was setting up using one of our products, and he said, boy, it would be great if this button couldn't turn off the audio. It's a little belt pack I've got behind me. I can show it, but it doesn't matter that much. But he explained why, and I said, oh, that's really interesting. So I went into the office, worked with one of my engineers. We added it in. We tested it. I called the guy and said, hey, can I send you some software to try? It should work. And he loaded it in. We, as an aside, always try to have a means of getting new software into our products. And usually now it's flash drives. And he tried it and said, great. And Sunday it was there on the air, less than 2 days later for the Super Bowl. So I think that if I don't get, as my wife says, too big in my pants and actually listen to what people say, they'll kind of guide us to what is going on. I know that, Alex, we talked about yesterday our new Model 201 interpreter console, and I don't want to bring it up now, but
let's talk about it a little bit. We can come back. So you're building this interpreter kit, and I am super excited about this because I have a very low opinion of every interpreter kit that I've touched so far, and I have spent lots of money on interpreter kits. So tell us, how did you get into developing? Why did you start developing an interpreter kit?
A couple of years ago, a friend of mine who has a rental and staging house was just, as an aside, said, oh, and we have to do interpreter work with this. And, I can do a giant PA with 2 tractor trailers, but I need, all day to get this interpreter thing going. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. You can put up the bulk of the whole system without losing any sleep, but this interpreter thing. And I asked him why, and I started looking into it. And he turned me on. I got to give a shout out to Kelly Epperson, who is a tech director in the Chicago area, and he does events around the country. And he's the kind of guy you could call and say, like he did the presidential candidate debates during the last election cycle. You could call him and just say, Kelly, set this up. And he also does interpretation work. And he spent a lot of time teaching me kind of the words of the application and the signal flow. And then I researched what was out there. And sometimes I've researched things and I said, these people have nailed it. They do a nice job. There's no room for us. But in this case, it seemed like there was room for a new product. So I just called Kelly, called other people, did block diagrams, and just kept going at it. And even at the NAB show a few weeks ago, somebody brought up one subtle little thing that we're going to add. But other than that, it's really just talking to people like you who have to do it. I'll be real curious if you think what we're doing is good because you haven't really seen our product. And
although we talked about it, I think a year ago, we had the same discussion because I got in and you said, oh, I'm developing this thing. And then I gave Gordon an earful of all the things it needs to have. And it looks like from the surface that it has a lot of those things. I'm really looking forward to giving it a test. How far away is it?
The hardware is done. I've got it right here. Hang on. There it is. It's really small.
About half the size of the ones that we've used in the past.
And this is complete. There is no central hub. There's no rack unit. you plug in a PoE Ethernet and away it goes.
Right,
and
this is Dante, right?
Right. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a Dante application for channel in, for channel out. It'll be ready. We're thinking late July, August. Hardware's done, seems to work. Now we got to put all the features in.
What does it take from the time you start thinking about it? Just walk us through the process of, I'm going to build a piece of hardware, and then that's going to do this. So you've talked to everyone about it. What does it take to actually engineer that product to have it come out the other end?
It depends on the complexity, because what we're taking on now sometimes is pretty complicated, and it takes a bunch of different resources. We have consultants in different parts of the world who are experts at different things. So it can be any way from about 9 months to 2 years. If we design it correctly, once it gets to the stage where it's out and people are trying it, then we can usually turn around feature additions or changes or fixes in, let's say, a week or 2 or 3.
Because those are all software, so the hardware has to work first. You get the hardware, you get the buttons where they need them to be, and that's the big thing. And then after that, you're able to update them with the firmware. Yeah,
you just hope that you don't miss something, like, why didn't I put another button in, or do I have enough audio channels to do what people want? That's the real killer. But if you've laid the foundation with the hardware, then it can go pretty quickly. So I would say the fastest is 6 months, and what's been kind of fun is on one of the products behind me, our Dante intercom engine, I had a roadmap and I knew what it needed to do initially, but I also knew what I wanted it to do. So it was kind of fun because we released it, and then a year later we did another software release, and then a year after that, year and a half after that, another software release to achieve what I wanted. Those software releases our users could load in using a USB flash drive for no cost. So that was nice in that they bought it for what it initially did. I didn't really tell them where I wanted it to go. And now those products really are doing everything I want them to do and more.
And what got you into comms?
I think it was because I was talking to some people in LA, Dave Brand, who's mostly retired now, who had a company called Intercom Specialties. And I kept hearing 2 things. One, nobody knows intercom. And 2, the people who know intercom and get it going, it still sounds terrible. And the expectations that people had of intercom was so low, it kind of was disappointing to me that people said, oh, that's a lot of noise and the levels all over the place and it doesn't do this. I thought, why? Why not apply a professional audio background to intercom and let the people, maybe it's self-serving, but I kind of think that if we do a good job, it lets all of you and your clients relax and do a better job at what they're really hired to do. Put on an event, put something on the air, stream something, have a live event. And if I can get rid of the variables, the poor performance, then, we're providing some value to the industry. And I think we've achieved that. If I can tell a little story that kind of got me going on both the intercom and the audio of IFB, interrupted foldback talent queuing. I went out to Fenway Park in Boston. I've been fortunate because people say, sure, come on out. If you can get a flight, you can come. And I went, and there was a rain delay or something, and I was up in the booth, I was there, and it seems to me the announcer for the Orioles was Jim Palmer, the Hall of Fame pitcher. And I don't know, you probably have some sports fans who are listeners, but Jim Palmer was as good in his day as you get, right? And he's just there hanging, waiting. And I said, Mr. Palmer, can I hear what your headset sounds like? And I put on his headset. It was distorted. It was so loud. It was awful. And I said, respectfully, how do you call a game if that's your cue? And he said, I'm a professional and I just have to deal with what I'm given. I said, well, that's pretty awful. And he said, well, okay. And I literally flew home saying, I can't give crap to a Hall of Fame pitcher. That is ridiculous. And
Right.
so that kind of drove me to say, we can do better than that. And whenever we would test something and the noise floor would be too high, I kept thinking, why? Is this really what people deserve?
It's funny. I find that use a lot of our smaller systems. We have big systems that have ClearCom matrices or Readles or whatever that have hundreds. But the smaller kits that we build out, I build them around your system, and it's so luxurious because it's so quiet. You turn it on and it all just works, and it's like radio quality. Like you could use it for a show. In fact, we've transported stuff back and forth using it. And it is it's just this really you feel like there's like this like you're just driving a nice car, like when you're used to all this other stuff, and comms is really important. I was on a show last night actually, and with Mickey who's here on the show, and I used to say that comms are half the show, and I think yesterday I was really thinking it might be 75% of the show. It might be more than that, and it's just such an because there's so much communication that has to happen to have a live show work. Now you also, a big piece of what you do is announcer boxes. How did you get into that? And, and what do you think about because that's what I'm using here. I have a 205. I've had lots of them with more buttons, less buttons, but how did you get into announcer boxes and how do you go through the decision process of what's needed?
Well, we started with, looking at and I hope I'm not, what do they say, goring anybody's ox, because a lot of companies, they do different things. They do good things. And one of the units we looked at was the AB100, which is one of the first dedicated announcer consoles. And this product was from ClearCom. Actually, it started with Intercom Specialties in LA. And they built the first 100. Dave Brand and I think Keith Hall, who's my buddy, very knowledgeable guy, they were building them, and they said, "Hey, ClearCom, would you make this?" So ClearCom said, "Sure, we'll go ahead," and they offered it. And I was speaking with Dave Brand, and he said, "Nothing has happened to my original design." He said, "I'm a good idea guy, but I'm not a great engineer. The noise floor is too high. The performance is this and this. You should make one." I said, "Okay, what is it again?" I literally didn't have any idea. So I researched it, came out with it. We went down to the United Center, which is where the Bulls play in Chicago, and they tried it, and it didn't work. It like bombed. But they didn't use it on the air. It was just 4:00 on game day, and I said, "Okay, I guess I got a lot to learn." Came back to our office, figured out what was wrong, and started improving it. So those were analog. Our first units were all analog announcer consoles, and I remember going to Lincoln, Nebraska with my overnight bag, and NMT, who was folded into NEP, they said, "Sure, come on out." And I watched a big-time college football game get produced, brought out my unit. They looked at it, and that gave me real-world, very interesting things that they said would help them. And I made a lot of notes. It was sort of amusing because, I brought one change of clothes, and they said, "Well, why don't you stay for rehearsal day tomorrow?" And then they said, "Well, stay for the game, and then stay for." So I ended up driving over to the local, Target or Walmart, and buying one of those 3 packs of underwear and socks. But I said, if people are going to invite me to stay in a truck or in a booth to actually watch an event, I'm going to do it. And
It's so valuable. Like, when you sit there and watch any team, do a, when you're listening to the comms and you're watching what they're doing, you immediately start to see what's missing, what's important to them, what's there, because it's never quite right. It's all like you're all trying to make it all work.
Yeah, goofy stuff. Like I learned that depending on where cameras are, that talent like to flip around their headset to have the boom come across their face one side or the other. And so with that, if you flip your headset around, it means a normal left ear is now right ear, and right ear is now the left ear. So we added in software a reverse controls function so that you could still go to the left pot, turn it, and it would be your left ear. So if you like to reverse your headset, you could easily change it so that you didn't have to say, oh, well, wait, I got to remap. So again, it's a lot of it is stress reduction and trying to learn. I'm pretty comfortable with our interpreter console, but right now I'm working on something new. I like to have something percolate, and as an example of what we do, we're working on a 2-channel Dante mic pre that's going to support instrumentation mics, the microphones that use BNC connectors and constant current. Why? Because we've been approached by one of the rocket companies who wants to record and measure the signal level of a rocket, which you guys would probably know better than me, but is that approaching 160, 170, 180 dB SPL? And so they would use special mics that would come into our box, will allow for the TEDs, which is the transducer electronic data sheet support. Anyway, I'm learning about measurement microphones and interfacing to them, and it's my fun. I'm a product guy, and so if anybody listening has ideas on what we need to do, let me know.
It's always a dangerous thing to say here because we all have a lot of ideas. This is, I was just going to show you, this is a decade ago of us building. We were hacking together these online events, 10 years ago. And this is one of them. This is Shannon Cooper, our producer. But you see the studio technology here. And what we were doing is we were able to talk to the participants. We were able to talk to the producers. We were able to talk, we have this all tied up. And all of it was just us kind of cobbling something together. But that little box was the core of the system, of how you make all that stuff work. And again, when we got it, I was like, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with this. And by the end, we were filling up every little bit of it that it could possibly do. It's really, really valuable. Courtney, you've got a couple questions?
Yeah, I wanted to know, thanks for joining us, Gordon. I wanted to know, what are the requirements of an interpreter's console versus a typical announcer's or producer's console? What are the special needs of the interpreter that console addresses?
All right. Well, what I learned was that typically there's a what they call a floor microphone, and that would be the person who was giving, let's say, a presentation, and the interpreter would hear the floor. And the other main audio channel is at least what I was taught. So if I'm wrong, that's okay. I want to learn. Is called relay. And what's interesting about relay is the designated intermediate language if they need to have one. So the interpreter, and you can see I'm going to hold the little box up. The interpreter, there we go, is able to listen with a button select to either the floor or a relay. And those are Dante channels. And so let's say that I am doing Spanish and Portuguese, and the person is speaking English at the floor. So I'm listening to the floor in English, and then I'm interpreting into Spanish. No problem. But let's say a Russian speaker, you've invited someone from Russia to speak, they start talking, you might have an interpreter doing Russian to English. And that'll be on the relay channel, which is spread to everybody. And then I listen to the English, and from that, so I press my select button, listen to relay. If I listen to floor, I hear Russian, and it doesn't do me a lot of good. I flip to relay, I hear English, and then I interpret into Spanish. That's one of the peculiar things. A couple other things that we decided to do is many of the commercial interpretation systems, and I respect what people did, but they're all analog, tend to be older. They were really meant for in a building where, let's say I'm interpreting into Spanish, and they have, and that audio feed goes to a transmitter. could be RF, it could be infrared, so that people in the hall can put on a earpiece and receiver and hear my interpretation into Spanish so they, understand that language. But nowadays, so much of what we're doing is streaming, right? It's not local. So really what oftentimes want to be generated is really an IFB, right? It's very similar to a broadcast IFB, so that what we can do very simply with this box is we can take, let's say, floor or relay, send that out, and then when the interpreter activates their talk function, it can follow the rules, either not change level at all, or it can dim, be attenuated by 10, 15, 20 dB with the interpreter's mic going on top. That would be appropriate if you're streaming, because someone listening in Japan probably still wants to hear in the background the original signal, be it in, Russian or English, but they want to hear the interpreter's version, let's say, into Japanese at full level. So it's very easy with our product to say, okay, we had to make a new term up. I forget what we call it, because I didn't want to use IFB because it's not part of the interpreter world. But, we can do that. You'll also get a kick out of something that, I'm sorry, I'm not used to holding stuff up, but there you go. It says slow down. At NAB, people said, oh, you have a digital function that slows down. I said, no, we're not that smart. But all that does is it takes and generates a 18 or 20 kilohertz tone out of a separate Dante channel. And then that allows you to trigger one of our Dante display units. And you put that at the podium, and you put a sign that says, if this lights up, please slow down. The interpreter can't keep up. So
it's a wetware controller.
Yeah. So, and so when you press the slow down button, it's really just generating this high frequency tone, but it will achieve the slow down function. And the fun I have is that you can turn on the slow down function, but you can also have it do pulse stretching, meaning if you tap it, it'll generate 2 seconds or 3 seconds or 4 seconds of slow down. Because, again, I don't want the interpreter have to say, I want to hold it long enough that the person really sees it. I want the interpreter to be able to tap it, and then the light up for 6 seconds at the podium so that the person can see it. And the other I think kind of interesting thing is for another product, we put in the ability to store and play back WAV files. And it was for a paging console, of which, it's back there and I won't get it out. But, I was going to have a pre-paged chime, and then I thought, well, the person in Chicago is going to like the chime, but the person in New York is not. So we just put in the ability to store a WAV file. So we took that technology and put it into this interpreter console so that you can store 2 up to 40-second messages. And you might say, well, why? Well, I was talking to a person who set up interpreter applications. This is kind of funny. He said we had, I forget, 6 or 8 booths, temporary booths set up. And I went in and there was a boom box in every booth with the microphone up to in the booth stuck up to the speaker of the boom box. I'm like, what? He said, yeah, they made CDs of the different languages, put them in the boom boxes, hit repeat, and then the audio person in the morning could turn up the pots and hear, and turn up pot 1 and hear, this is the Spanish station. Turn up pot 2, this is French.
Right.
An audio identifier.
So you can put an audio. You can put anything you want in there, but you can have an audio ID. So and it's coming from that box. Like it's not like if I've got it wired up, it's going back to the audio engineer and they're hearing that. That's great.
Right, and you can leave it run for a day and say, this is Northwestern University Conference Hall 7,
Yeah.
and on June 6th, we're having the conference starting at 2:00. This is the audio channel. And you can just have it repeat so that anybody who's monitoring it. But that was the kind of fun thing that I liked putting in.
And does the interpreter channel also does it have the option to deliver just a clean mic from the interpreter back to the audio engineer rather than ducking over top of something else? Is it able
Absolutely, because you can choose whether you have an audio source or not.
Yeah.
So you can say no audio source, and if you do choose an audio source, you define what you want to have happen. Will it be there all the time? Will it duck?
Because most of the analog ones don't do that. Like they're designed to flow through, and so we do a lot to work around them, because they're adding a lot of noise to our system. So it's
this you choose. The only thing that I didn't include, and I've been thinking about it. Usually when I'm going to sleep, my wife goes, "What are you thinking about?" And of course, my answer is, "Only you, dear." But I'm really thinking about interpretation, and the one thing that we kind of can't do is we don't have two output channels. We don't have one straight interpreter and also a separate channel that tracks with the program and that. But that's about the only thing that I
That'd
know.
be useful. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead, Mickey.
Hey, Gordon. Thanks for being here. Yeah, just going back to the IDs. Typically, like in larger broadcast systems, you'd have IDs coming from the broadcaster going to the commentary station, but it's only on the larger systems that have like a dedicated frame that have IDs going back from the venue going to the broadcaster. So having it within the actual commentary unit or commentary box is handy. I'm curious, like with your development of new products, because a lot of your products utilize a similar or the same chassis, and also a lot of them share the same types of I/O and also controls on it. Do you have just like a base chassis with a specific number of I/O and also controls on it that you develop on, like a just plain old box that you load code into? And do you use like ASICs or FPGAs and on all the same types of chips on the boxes, and you just replace the code there as you develop?
That's a really good question. First of all, we did one product with DSP years and years ago, and it worked out fine, right? Digital signal processing. I think it was a Texas Instrument. You might have remembered, was it TMS 320 or something? But we weren't really excited about it, and a friend of ours said, you really have to look at field programmable gate arrays. And, a lot of people know what they are, and if you don't know what they are, it's really interesting to study up, because without power, they're just a bunch of silicon, a bunch of resources. But when you power up, a program loads in and it becomes whatever you want: a radar detector, a collision avoidance system for an airplane, and audio routing. So what we did was we had one of our consultants, who's really, really great, put in a lot of the audio functionality into FPGA. We're a Xilinx house. Other people, will use other brands, but we like Xilinx. And philosophically, we try to tackle one or two hard things at any one time. And once we're done, that kind of goes into our toolkit. And for example, I told you about using the ID playback from another product. The other product, that took weeks to work out to get it to work. But once that was working well, we knew it was then portable. As far as enclosures go, there are designs, and if we're coming up with a new product and it can fit into something that we did already, we say, yeah, that's great, let's use that form factor. But almost always, there's one product that is getting a new form factor, and then that goes into our collection of, one rack space or a half rack, that kind of thing. And the Model 201 is based on, Alex, your 205, very similar. It's basically the same.
Yeah, it looks like the same chassis or very similar.
Right, same size. But we said, will it fit in here? But if it didn't, we would say, okay, let's make a new one. So we don't repeat using the same hardware typically in terms of circuit boards, but the general shape and size of things, if we can reuse what we've already had in our library, then we will.
Good, Mickey.
With we use a lot of the 207s for esports competitions. It's really handy because we could get game audio out of a computer, put it in the Dante world while still allowing the players to be able to listen using their often sponsored headsets, sponsored by Asus or other esports brands. Is there a possibility, because we're seeing more and more USB headsets being put out by these brands, and these teams are sponsored? Is there a possibility of a contribution unit or a commentary unit that could act as a USB host, so you can plug the gamers' USB headsets in, as opposed to relying on TRRS connection?
Absolutely. I mean, I have a pad of paper with me, and I'm taking notes. And I know that having TRRS was a nice addition, and we've used that in some intercom units, and also the interpreter console you might see on the back has a TRRS
and
ability.
Some of the comms belt packs do as well.
Right, and that's because of that gaming product. We learned how to do that. But USB headset, I'll pursue support for it, because it is pretty ubiquitous now, and USB microphones and things like that. So I've been kind of aware of the companies doing USB interface chips and things like that. So I can't say when and in what form, but we'll make a note of it. That's
Just
great.
planting the little seed there.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and jump to the questions from our producers watching.
All right. First question comes in from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. He says, I have a couple of Model 214s. I find the headphone and mic levels seem low, even using ST controller to raise the headphone to high and the microphone to 64 dB. Any suggestions?
Yes. If you think that the unit actually is defective, contact us for return authorization. We'll check it out. If you have a way of measuring the Dante level, take a look at it. I've been working with one radio station in the Pacific Northwest, and I encourage them to get one of our products which actually meters the Dante level. And this way they could ensure that the level they have on the Dante channel is actually sufficient, right? There shouldn't be, with the 214, there shouldn't be any problem getting lots of gain. And it's interesting, Dante doesn't have a nominal level. I don't blame them. We've decided that we like negative 20 dBFS, which is kind of what we picked. But somebody in Europe could say we'd rather do negative 18. So we like neg 20 with 20 dB of gain. That's pretty tweaky, but it just means that when a 214 user has a mic plugged in and sets the gain, that we'd like to, on peaks, maybe get to negative 20. It's not meant, you might say, how come on average it's not negative 20? Well, remember, we're just supposed to be a mic pre getting to your console or other surface where you have trim adjust. But there should be no problem with that product getting to a sufficient level, both in terms of the mic and the headphones. So I would say the first thing I would do is have a good way of actually looking at those Dante channels and seeing what level you think are insufficient, because maybe they're okay, maybe they're not. And if there's a problem, contact us.
Next question.
Next question comes in from Steve Kinsey in Lancaster, California. He says, I have a couple of Model 544Ds on my Dante network. They're both being used to introduce 2-watt and 4-watt third-party communication loops into Dante. In other words, Holy Land SolidComm C1. What benefit would I get from adding a model 5421 or model 5422A to my network?
I think that's 2-wire, 4-wire. Yeah, go ahead, Gordon.
2-wire,
Yeah.
4-wire. Okay.
Really, the 5421 and the 5422A are what we're calling our Dante intercom audio engines. And those are dedicated signal processors that allow you to create virtual party lines. And the reason that we call them and other people call them virtual is because Dante is basically separate send and receive channels, right? So it's not like the days of having an analog belt pack where you literally bang them together with cables and you can add as many as you want. So really the advantage of using a 5421, I shouldn't say advantage, is if there's things you want to do. For example, if you want to add some of our Dante belt packs to your setup, you would use the 5421 to create these virtual party lines. The model 5422 also has some really interesting features. For example, they have IFB capability with Dante program and interrupt input and the ability to use voice operated or tone operated. So it's not so much will it make what you're doing work better. It's really a matter of what do you want to do? Are there things you can't do now that these units would help you achieve? So maybe that's the best answer.
And as you talk about the party line, the mix minus is a big deal, right? Like when you're building those out, like
exactly.
You can use up a whole mixer. Like not that I've ever done this, but when we first got the belt packs, you go, oh, I got the belt packs, but now you got to build a mix minus for every belt pack. For all the different things that you're doing there, it's not just that having that processing in a box makes a difference.
Yeah, I think, and just to review it, as I often do, talking to people on the phone, the idea of the mix minus channels is if I can give just a quick tutorial. Let's say you have 3 people on a digital party line, and user 1 wants to hear what user 2 and 3 are saying. But user 1 doesn't necessarily want themselves to come right back at them at full level. They want to hear themselves with side tone, which is typically adjustable, but they want to hear 2 and 3. User 2 wants to hear user 1 and 3, but not themselves. User 3 wants to hear user 1 and 2. Okay, so what it means is that you want 3 mix minuses, and the definition of mix minus is a mix of everybody but yourself, if that's a clear way of doing it. And so we implement that in FPGA, and someone can rightfully say, well, I can do that in my audio console. Well, you can. You can. Go ahead. We simulated it by buying a Symmetrix DSP processor, and we created a 4 belt pack system, and it worked. We were excited. We created 4 mix minuses, and then we realized Symmetrix makes a great product. It's great to be able to build a concert hall or a convention center audio system out of it. But what we did in ours was make dedicated called party line functions that do that. So, yeah, you're right. It's the mix minus that makes it go.
Everyone, I think almost everybody I know gets those belt packs and starts with, I'm just going to do it in my own mixer, and very quickly realizes like how many mix minuses they're building to make all of that work. And every time you add those packs, you add more, and it gets more and more complex. You just kind of dig yourself in. Next question.
Another question from Steve Kinsey in Lancaster. He says, at what point should I consider incorporating a Dante leader clock like the model 5401A or 5402 into my network?
Dante, by its inherent design, doesn't need an external clock, because every Dante device can be what they're now calling leader clock. And typically you don't want to use a small device as a leader clock, but anything with what they call their Brooklyn 2 module, now Brooklyn 3, and it, might be adequate. The reason why we developed our products is that we wanted to to have a product that somebody could point to and say, that is providing clocking for my entire network. Because what people were doing, they might have said, well, my console is providing the clock signal for all my devices. Well, you take that console down to load new firmware or clean the Coca-Cola spill, Dante will automatically move to another device for its clock. Maybe not something you want. Maybe you don't even know where it goes to. And I laugh and say, the reason why our product is nice is you can point to it and say, that's messing me up. That's the thing that's not working right. It does work well, but my point is, by having a dedicated device, you know what is providing your clock source. If you have 5 or 10 Dante devices, I don't think you need to have our device, as long as you have a reasonably full-featured, a console with Dante or a DSP-based system. But you start getting into 20, 30, 40, 50 or more devices, it's very nice to have a dedicated unit that you know is providing your clocking. And I don't want to push our products. All I'm saying is we have a very good temperature stabilized oscillator inside. So will your system work better with us? No, but it'll work more consistent. It'll make troubleshooting much easier. And we have people, one customer, as far as we knew, had over 300 Dante devices on their network, all clocked to one of our devices. And if you look at the cost of all the devices versus having one of our dedicated master clocks, it was, 1 or 2% of the overall system cost for a dedicated clock. I don't think is a bad investment.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota, and he wants to know, what is the Dante I/O capacity of your new interpreter box?
It has 4 output channels, which are interpret 1, interpret 2, a hot mic output, and then a shared output, which I didn't mention it before, but we put in a talkback channel, which means that the interpreter can press a button and mute everything else and go out a separate channel. So if you wanted a producer or director or even the audio person or a production assistant to have, let's say, a Fostex Dante connected monitor speaker, I mean, the interpreter could literally say, I'm ready for my lunch, or please send someone in, it's not going right. So we have 4 Dante output channels, and then on the input side, we have floor, relay, and then 2 auxes. And the auxes are interesting because you can route them to the headphones as mono, as stereo. One of the things that I didn't see on most commercial interpreter consoles was the fact that now when you're running an event, you're oftentimes going to have, let's say, video playback. Let's say I'm at a university, I welcome you and say, our president couldn't be here today, but she's made a greeting for you that we're gonna watch right now. And up on the big screen comes, a 5-minute message. Well, we have aux inputs so that those can come in. The interpreter can hear them. You can also route those out so that we hope that we're supporting, streaming and other applications, not just on-site things. So to answer your question, it's 4 outputs and it's 4 inputs. They're all at the same sample rate. We're basically 48K we're looking at. And we expect to we can clock ourselves, but we would expect to have another device in the setup providing clock.
Next question.
Next one comes in from our panelist here, Mickey Makachor from the Philippines. He says, what is the logic behind your model numbers? What's the secret sauce there?
There's none.
I was waiting for something deep. I was like, I never understand what all these numbers mean.
Well, we do the best we can. As I say, we're probably better at products than naming or marketing them. Um, I did a telecom product 30 years ago called the BP1 for bypass 1. It was an 8-channel box. And then we added some features and came out with the BP2. That was 8 channels. And then we came out with the BP4, which was 4 channels.
We just know them by the number. You just know where to go. You know to go to the street, turn left. So it's
and it just becomes a way of identifying the product. We try to put a little text description in with it, but like to say there's a sophisticated way, but there's not.
Next question.
Next one comes in from James Haldane in Vancouver, Canada. Interpreters I work with often want to plug a portable voice recorder in so they can have a copy of their interpretation. Is there a place for them to get a record out from this interpreter's console?
There is not. What we decided a while ago, well, I did, and the people who work for me weren't always in agreement, but that I kind of like, once you're in the Dante world, you're in the Dante world. You can do a lot with it. So, but I respect an interpreter wanting to record what they're doing. My suggestion would be that there are low-cost interfaces from Dante to analog. We make them, Audinate makes them. And so depending on the recorder they want to use, because in the digital domain, you can, in a sense, I don't want to say infinitely, but certainly the interpret channel that goes to a streaming box can also go to a Dante to analog converter, which could then go to whatever recorder that person wanted. To support those kind of applications, we do have that hot mic out channel. So if the person said, I want to record everything, even when I'm not actively interpreting, I would like to have all my booth activity recorded. Hot mic meaning no button press will ever mute that. I mean, the interpreter or on-air talent does have to be careful, but it can be nice because you can take yourself off air and still know that someone is monitoring, and you can say, quick, get me the stats, or, I'll be interpreting next the president of the UN or whatever. The hot mic is always there. So that's why we didn't put an analog output, but we feel like there's very easy ways to do it in Dante.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and could they just take their laptop and bring it in instead of their portable voice recorder laptop in and run Dante virtual sound card on their laptop and make a recording that way and just choose the interpreter channels on the Dante stream from there?
Yes, and the audio quality should be really good.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Mickey Macature, once again in the Philippines. Why has Studio Technologies been so interested in developing Dante-enabled products as opposed to other digital or audio over IP protocols?
Starting about 10 years ago, we looked at what was available in terms of, we didn't feel like we wanted to invent something. We weren't that smart. And as a little company, we wanted to join what other people were doing. And so we looked at other things that were out and just didn't like it. But as we looked at Dante, I think we were the 100th licensee. And this was probably 6 or 7 years ago. And what they were doing, I just liked. I liked Dante. And even to this day, I think it's very good. There's a couple of things we keep needling them about, things that we feel would help us and other people. But I figure for a sophisticated protocol to have a couple of complaints is not bad. Now, we've been recently also supporting ST2110, the newer SIMPD, everything over Ethernet standard. And so we've been coming out with a few ST2110 products, but we just felt Dante is very good. And that's why we licensed it and plan on, continuing to come out with products. Really, we've looked at like AES3. unbalanced or balanced. And I don't want to say it's a dead end because I'm not trying to gore anybody's ox. I just don't think it's a great thing for the future. I'm amazed that Maddie took a resurgence in, at least in the broadcast world, because if you really study Maddie, it was never really supposed to do what people can do with it now. I saw some really early wonderful Maddie implementations, but I frankly thought it would have died a long time ago. But it seems to, So we're really Dante and analog. I still like analog, and we still support it, but some of the other formats we think are sort of falling away, like AES3 and maybe Maddie.
Next question.
Comes in from Trinidad in the West Indies. Rion Smith wants to know, should someone try to learn FPGA programming to build custom boxes, or better to go ask someone like Studio Tech to build it? And if so, where to start learning?
FPGA development is not for the faint of heart. I haven't touched it. It is really a specialty. It's the people that do work for us, I'm amazed at. They're really bright people and what they can do. And so if you could successfully take courses, teach yourself FPGA, I'd get out of the audio business and I'd consult for FPGA development, because your hourly rate is going to double or triple. We do audio because we like it, right? Not because it's going to get us really rich. So if you can get the chops of FPGA, go ahead, but it's a really specialized, very both theoretical and difficult to implement. But once it goes, it's fantastic. We have developed for us sample rate conversion, and once we had a single channel going, then we were able to scale it to do 64 channels simultaneously. We had a big enough FPGA device, but that's pretty intense, right? Having one work and then going, oh yeah, we just spawn 64 of these and it works. But getting that one to work was both theoretically difficult and practically difficult. And we don't do custom products per se, but people come to us and say, if you'd only do this, I know, Alex, you and I are going to have a chat about what you've been wanting. That's how we get our ideas, with people suggesting things, but rarely do we do a custom, I don't want to say a one-off, but something specifically to somebody.
If you could do a one-off, as long as they have the money to develop something for 9 months and build, it's possible, but it would be a lot.
Yeah.
Next question.
Last one probably coming in from Mickey McAture in the Philippines says, do you have any stories about interesting or unconventional uses of the 5401A?
It's been used a lot of different places, and I guess I've been kind of amazed at where it's gone. I know there's a concert hall in Reykjavik, Iceland, that uses it. It seems to me that it was getting used in Sweden. Maybe this is a bad thing to talk about, but a few years ago, we sold some gear to Russia. And I know that right now, Russia, with the goings-on in Ukraine, is not a fan favorite, right, of people around the world. And if you're listening to this from Russia, it's not that I have a problem with the individuals, but, it's the government and stuff. So we shipped some 5401 to Russia, and they had some questions about using it. And I had to kind of, audio people and philosophy, wow, okay, it doesn't really usually mix, but I had to think about what level of support are we going to ship more units to Russia? Is that something that we're interested in. And what I realized is I'm going to support the products we sold and the individuals. You know, if the email didn't come in from the director of communications at the Russian military, I was going to answer their questions, and I did, and they were very bright people, and they got it going. But that was sort of an interesting geopolitical question that landed in my lap in the Chicago suburbs.
Mickey, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, with the ability to sync based off of GPS, if there's any like interesting use cases you've come across there, and also with it supporting both PTP version 1 and 2, like how do people use like the PTP v2 side of things?
Okay. Dante is PTP version 1, as you know. AES 67 and ST2110, which audio transport uses pretty much AES 67, that's PTP version 2. So our products at the core, our Dante leader clocks are PTP v1 devices, but they are capable of doing limited PTP v2 support using Dante's AES 67 implementation. And our plan is to come out with probably early next year PTP v2 product, which would work with the ST2110 and the AES 67 better in the sense that having more flexibility. Because right now with Dante's implementation of AES 67, we don't have a lot of control, right? We can provide a leader clock, but we can't set many of the specific parameters. So I know I've been a little circular on this, but it kind of gives you an idea of where version 1 and version 2 is used. We have on the basic product, the 5401A, a sync input. So one can come in with video clock or a word clock or 10 megahertz, which is what the instrumentation people use. Or in the case of the 5402, we have an integrated GNSS receiver, which is sort of the broader description for the US's GPS, Europe's Galileo. I don't know if you pronounce it Baidu from China. That's their system. And then, interestingly enough, Japan even has a augmentation system. They put up 1 or 2 satellites above Japan, which augments GPS. And we can also support that. Russia has GLONASS, which, their own timing system. The issue that we've had with Dante is let's say that you have a New York facility, a Hong Kong facility, and a Tokyo facility. You can have 5402s at each location, and those can be locked to, let's say you're locked to Galileo, right? Europe's system. They will all be in time, but we don't have the ability right now of injecting in the date, and all we have is the Linux time, which is seconds since, was it January 1st of 1970? But Dante has not been oriented to actually providing today's date and the time, the clock time. And that's one of the things that we've been asking them about, and we may have to do it on our own and not rely on some of their hardware to do that. So maybe that's an overview in that, yes, 3 Model 5402s can lock to a very precise satellite-based system, but we cannot provide to each of those locations the date and the time of day, which some applications really need to lock everybody together.
Good, Mickey.
And yeah, I guess like it's really useful then in terms of, say, if you have systems where you need to tie in Dante with ES67, Ravenna 2110, but like with other Dante-enabled audio hardware, you have to run whatever is your master clock in the PTP v1 realm. It also has to be the master clock in PTP v2. So having a separate master clock device, a dedicated clock device, would mean you wouldn't need to tie your audio hardware, like say your mixing console or whatever it may be, to also being the PTP v2 master.
Right, because we can provide both out of one unit based on the same time base. So yes, they would all be, in a sense, locked together.
Gordon, thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate it.
Really, really great to have you here on the show.
Been a lot of fun. Thanks.
And thank you so much to the panelists. Of course, we can't do this without you. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end that makes all of this possible. There's a small village that lights up, that figures out who we're going to be having on the show and making sure that they're taken care of before they get to the show. And then there's the engineering and this is not your run-of-the-mill Zoom meeting. So there's a lot of folks that put that together, and we really appreciate all of their contribution. And finally, thank you to to our producers, the viewers that are watching this every single day, asking all these questions and keeping this whole thing moving forward. We really are just a big village that does it all for ourselves. So it's really great. Today we traveled in the Tlaloc Traversal. If we had to wander around asking these questions from each person all over the world, we would have traveled 87,000 miles. That's 141,000 kilometers. And that is 693 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. That was great, Gordon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We went real deep right at the very end. Like, yeah, we're just going to go all the way through there. We were running a little over. I was like, oh, this is too good. This is too good. We're just going to keep going. So it was great.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks so much. See you later.